Hi guys, welcome to Mrs. Lasseter's list of AP Biology tips. Tonight we're going to be going over one of my top 10 lists. These are the top 10 types of AP Biology questions you should be ready for on the AP Biology exams. So, more types of questions than are on this list will appear on the exams, but these are the ones that you should really prepare for and know to look out for. So, let's go ahead and get started. As a general review, in the AP Biology exam, starting with Section 1, you will have multiple choice and grading questions. Together, this Section 1 counts for 50% of your exam score. In Section 2, you will have free response questions, or commonly abbreviated as FRQs, and there'll be 2 long ones and 6 short ones. These also count for 50% of the exam score. But what is actually in those multiple choice, graded, and FRQ questions? We're about to find out in our top 10 review. Starting with number 10, models. So, on the multiple choice section of the exam, there might be information based off of models, and this could include processes that are depicted or things that you will have to determine in multiple choice format based on representations from models, illustrations, graphs, experiments you have to analyze. You might have to analyze and apply information from a data set or to perform basic calculations based off of information provided in a model. So be ready to look for this type of model information that may appear on the exam. All right, coming in next with number 9. Experiments and data. This goes closely along with models, but there will be a lot of experimental questions on the AP Biology exam. Sometimes there'll be a section with one experimental stimulus and then several questions that follow, all related to the same experiment. So be sure when you come across one of these questions to read through the entire experiment, maybe scan the question types ahead of time, go back, read through all the important data, don't ignore the graphs and the figures that are presented with the experiment. So make sure you are comfortable interpreting data and graphs within experiments as well. This will help you for those types of experimental questions on the multiple choice section of the exam. When you get to evaluating scientific questions, this might be related to some of the science practices you've gone over in AP Biology. This could involve looking at types of data, looking at ethical considerations, looking at how results support conclusions, and other things related to experimental design. So be sure you are ready to evaluate appropriate questions that could be asked based on an experiment, or be prepared to evaluate certain experimental setups for those different qualities. Coming in. Number 8, let's start talking about the grading questions. Now, when most people think of grading questions, they're going to associate them with math questions. This is not the only place on the exam where math can show up. You may see math in the multiple choice, you may see math problems in the FRQ, but most commonly they will appear within the grading section. Now, 2019, that is currently, when I'm recording, is the last year when the grid-ins are going to actually appear on the AP Biology exam. After this year, they are going away, but there could still be related questions on future AP Biology exams. So 2019 test takers, you guys are the last ones who are going to be doing the grid-ins officially on the AP Biology exam. Now, you will have a formula sheet that is provided to you the entire duration of the exam during the multiple choice grid-in section and during the FRQ section, so don't be afraid about memorizing, or don't worry about memorizing all of those formulas that you might have gone over during AP Biology throughout the years. You should be familiar with those formulas though, and I have a whole other video and podcast related to the formulas that are available on the formula sheet and reviewing those. I have a whole other top 10 list of top 10 formulas you should be aware of, so stay tuned for that. So be prepared to use any of the formulas that might appear: surface area to volume ratio, population equations, Hardy-Weinberg, those kind of things, water potential, all of which could show up on the grid-in section. So you can also have grading questions that could have little or no math involved with them. They just are going to be answered in number format. For example, there could be a question that shows up where you have to identify a certain species on a cladogram by a number, and then you would write that number in your grid-in box. You could have a genetics question that just has to do with ratios. So don't freak out if you reach a grading question and there is little or no math involved, because that can also appear too. All right, jumping on to the FRQs. There could be math on the FRQs as well, like I mentioned before. Some common equations that might show up on FRQs: Hardy-Weinberg problems, chi-square problems, population growth, anything and everything available on the formula sheet, any sort of error analysis you might want to be ready for, averages, means, just typical data analysis. So be sure, again, you are familiar with all the formulas on your formula sheet, when to use them, and be sure to check out old FRQs that are available to you from the College Board site, because this will give you a good idea of the extent of math that could be shown on the FRQs. Don't forget to show your work, because sometimes you can be given points for the way you set up a problem as well. Number 4, graphing questions. You will probably, not guaranteed, but you will probably have some sort of graphing question where you may have to construct a graph or analyze a graph on the FRQs. If you have to create a graph, do not forget several important things. You can get simple points just for including things like your title, appropriately scaling your graph, your axes, and making the right choice for the type of graph that you need to include for the data set. So if it's change over time, you might want to consider a line graph. If you're comparing different categories, think maybe it should be a bar graph, but it really depends on the experiment, on the data set you're working with. If there's error involved, don't forget to include your error bars as well, as you can get easy points for those. So don't shy away from the graphs. Remember, including anything can sometimes get you a few points here and there on these FRQs. Coming down to number 3, long response questions. So these can be very detailed. They're typically experiment-based or case-based, and in these ones, you might have to look at an experiment and think about what is the question the researchers are investigating, how are they drawing conclusions, how can they pose questions from the data. You'll probably have several different sub-items you'll have to answer within these long response questions, so be sure to underline those keywords that are typically bolded in the question so you know exactly what you are answering in each type. Remember, for all FRQs, you need to write in complete sentences, write in pen, no bullet point lists or diagrams will be scored on their own, so please try to write in complete sentences when you're working on these FRQs. Next up, short response FRQs. So again, even though these are shorter, they might have larger details or longer introductions, and make sure you read the entire question prompt before answering them. Look at the words they're asking you to answer the question with. Is it describe, identify, label, compare, construct? And be specific and answer the prompt. So think it's not a formal essay, but you do need to make sure you answer the question. So don't make it long and fancy, just get to the point in complete sentences. All right, down to the last type of question you should be prepared for on the AP Biology exam, and this is brand new information. It is very common for you to see a scientific principle, an experiment, an experimental tool, laboratory tool that you have never seen before. And this is not meant to throw you off or to trick you. This is meant to see how you can apply your science practices in context within the exam. So do not freak out when you see information or experiments that are brand new. This is there to test you, and you should be used to applying your information that you learned throughout the year in AP Biology in new contexts with the information provided. I love to give the example of the comet assay question from one of the old FRQs. You probably didn't review a comet assay in your AP Biology course, but you definitely reviewed electrophoresis and the properties of DNA, with which you would have been able to have all the information you needed to answer that comet assay question of a new technique you probably never have seen before. So don't be afraid of these types of questions. And that is my top 10 list. As you go through your review and your practicing questions, please comment below. Think of other review topics you might want to consider. I have a whole bunch of top 10 lists I'll be including in here. If you like this video, there's also a podcast related to my AP Biology tips, so be sure to check that out either on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Google Play. And if you like this video, be sure to subscribe and comment about other topics you might want to see for AP Biology review in the near future. All the images in this video were provided by my own work, Unsplash, or Wikimedia Commons. Thanks guys for watching, and good luck with your studying.